Hey guys, this is Tom Paul Tipton, your host for the Exchange Podcast. We're coming to you from Living Water Church in Conway, Arkansas. I'd like to welcome you back to another episode and say thank you to those who support this podcast with your contributions. Please like and share us on Facebook and get the word out, and like, subscribe, and share us on YouTube. Send any questions you have and join in on the exchange.
Bingo bango, we're back. And we're back on a most celebratory occasion, that being the 4th of July. It's good to have everybody here. My name's JaVaughn Iversen. We are with the Exchange Podcast. I'm super excited to be here with Thomas. This man is a master of his craft. And what is that? He's determined. He is committed. And you know what? It doesn't matter how many veins are popping out of his leg. This man is going to show up to do the show because the show must go on.
That's right. I mean, you gotta. It's showtime. I learned that a long time ago. But you know what? I think about what this weekend is, and it's Independence Weekend, and I think about the men who suffered a lot, including my dad, and he was shot in Vietnam, and it's a miraculous story there, But I mean, men that put their lives on the line, and he certainly wouldn't want to be counted in with the men that gave up their lives. Most soldiers don't, but I think about them and I'm going, you know what? Varicose vein acting up, that shouldn't be any reason to stay home. But we got that taken care of, and that's just something that I've got to take care of. And anyway, I want to say Happy Independence Day, and the 4th of July is just right around the corner, and this is the weekend that we celebrate our independence from Britain. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit today because, one of the things that we talked about last week, and it's still a big story, is Roe v. Wade. And I don't think most people realize that Roe v. Wade, overturning that was one of the most pro-choice decisions, because when you look at it, the Republican states or the red states are just kind of like, you want to have an abortion, your state wants to have abortions, go ahead. We're just not going to. And the Democrat or blue states are like, well, no, we're going to have abortions, and so are you. And they want to force it on us, which is going, okay, well, where's pro-choice? That's covered under independence, my friend, and that's what we're celebrating this weekend.
What's more pro-choice than giving the states the ability to vote in or out the ability to get an abortion? I mean, that's pretty freedom of choice, if you ask me. You get this opportunity to really stand by the idea of states' rights. And I've heard a lot of people say this, oh, well, the South argued for states' rights for slavery. And the thing is, it's like, guys, it's slavery and abortion.
Both of them were impeding the lives of other people.
But the thing is, I'm gonna give it to you're right, states' rights. The people, you want to know where most of the protests were happening? You see it in Colorado, you see it in California, you see it in Washington, New York, Washington D.C., of course. You want to know what is the common factor for all 5 of those places I just mentioned? And there are others.
What's that?
You could still get an abortion there.
Well, yeah, there's...
I don't understand why there are protests. You could still get an abortion. And here's my compromise. I will say this. I think the states who are red states, I don't think they should make it a crime that if you leave your state, get an abortion, and then come back. I don't think that should be a crime. Here's the thing. I've always been, don't make me pay for everybody's stuff that I don't want to pay for. I don't want to pay for somebody's abortion. That's just something I don't agree with. Mm-hmm. I agree with your right to do what you will in wherever it's legal. And if it's illegal here in Arkansas, then I don't agree with it on a practical level, and I don't agree with it, because of my beliefs. But the
Yeah.
thing is, I've heard a lot of people say, and I saw this on TikTok. I didn't get into an argument. I always just pose questions, and then I see what people respond with. And a lot of people are saying, well, states who are banning abortion are also making it illegal for you to go across state lines to do whatever. And it's like, that's the cool thing about the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You're allowed to go do that. It's that's what we can do. We're a weird country. We're a weird project. This is by all means, this is still a project. I was talking, with a family member today, and they live in California, and they've got a lot going on over there, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, I haven't seen too many protests here in Arkansas, and we outright banned it the second it dropped. I mean, I've never seen something happen like that.
I don't think most people. I think most people have what Bill Clinton said when he ran for office, that it should be rare, legal, and safe. I think that's most people's thought on it. Is it should be safe, number one. If it's going to be legal, it should be safe and it should be rare.
Right.
Kind of like when you mentioned Civil War and states' rights. The slavery, and everybody wants to point to, the founders having slaves, and one of the things that they don't do, they're always going to point to people like Thomas Jefferson, and you go, well, okay, back then everybody had slaves, but point out something significant. Well, something significant about Thomas Jefferson and George Washington is they both released their slaves.
Yeah.
If today you were to say so and so had slaves, then that would be something worth, newsworthy. But what was newsworthy back then was that they released their slaves when they did. And I sent you that article. I don't know if you got to read it. Of course, it came from the History channel.
History.com?
Yeah, History.com.
Yeah,
of course, their take on it is really funny. I actually had a conversation, and it was really weird because I had read this article, and I said something about it on Facebook, and then somebody responded back who I don't think read it, but they had responded back almost with the exact same thing that History said, which what that leads me to believe is what we already know, and that is schools are teaching stuff that's completely wrong. And one of the things that Jefferson writes, and most people don't know this, but this article is about the original Declaration of Independence. And one of the things he writes in there is he says he has waged cruel war against human nature itself. Now, this is in the original Declaration. Yeah. This was omitted, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither. Now, he's talking about the slaves, and they omitted it because it was South Carolina who they were getting ready to go to war with Britain. They needed all of the colonies, and South Carolina was not going to sign on to go to war if the slaves had been freed. Now, one of the things that everybody wants to make the argument, including this, is, well, but they didn't free the slaves. So what they said and what they did are two different things. That's true, but it was going to be a undermining, and it was going to be a long undermining. I mean, even Jefferson knew that. They knew that you weren't just going to go and do this. And it's very much like the abortion thing. I mean, that whole debacle lasted for 50 years. And slavery lasted for much longer.
Yeah, and you look at it and you got to think about it too. Things like this, because this is a project, there's a lot of hypotheses that go out there. Abortion is one of them. Slavery was one of them.
Yeah.
And what would happen if could this country survive without slaves? And we do. We survive without it.
Yeah.
That took a while to take away. No one's saying it was okay. I'm not saying, I am one of the I don't like it when people say, oh, well, everybody had slaves. I don't like it mainly because it's like I can't give leeway there. It just all sucked.
Yeah.
But I will give grace to those who said, yeah, this isn't good. How do I eventually get rid of it? And I think here's the problem you see with a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum. Let's be honest. Everybody wants a microwave government when this is a crock pot.
Right. And when I say everyone had slaves, that's not to give anyone a leeway. That is that is because what so many on the left want to do is point out and say, well, Jefferson had slaves. Okay, you're not pointing anything specific out about him.
Did you also know that he has a plethora of descendants who gathered this year on Juneteenth to tell us that they are descendants of him?
Right.
And you want to know what the majority of those descendants look like? Black people.
Mm-hmm.
It's because there's something that was formed there, and one of his slaves, was his lover at one point. He had 2 families. And, it takes a lot for a person to get past, because there was a lot of fetishization, of course, back then with slaves, but to get past that and realize, oh, I actually love this person, even though they have the different skin color.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at that and go, okay, this is another reason why it's wrong. Not the main reason, not because you want to get your rocks off or anything, but it's because, hey, these people are people too. And, Thomas Jefferson, to go from I have slaves, I'm going to free slaves, and then also just write about, hey, listen, this all kind of began with Britain creating the transatlantic trade. It's got to end somewhere, and it did. Eventually, it did. We fought a war over it. We killed our own brothers and cousins and family members over it. And, a lot of people want to say, oh, well, that's, we're still suffering from that. And guys, I don't know. I still have the argument of I'm watching my dad go from a convicted felon to very closely getting his own business and working with one of the major car companies in the world, Tesla. And, and he's a black man. I don't see too many people talking like, hey, 4th of July is something that my family celebrates heavily because there's a lot of freedom here.
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to Abraham Lincoln said, in order to form a more perfect union. We're not perfect. We didn't start out as perfect. We started out as, it's called the American experiment for a reason. It's because when you're building a hypothesis or an experiment or anything, you work with what you have, and then you correct the mistakes that need to be corrected. And that's what they did. And you made the statement earlier about everyone wants a microwave government, and Dennis Prager, he was on Timcast. I don't know, it's been a week or so ago, something like that, maybe a little longer, and he made the statement that and he's Jewish in his nationality and in his religion. And he said no other religion has done more to undermine the institution of slavery and to end it other than Christianity. And that's true. I mean, if you go back and you read the book of Philippians, when you read that, if you just read it, what you're getting is that Paul is writing a book, or a letter rather, because this slave had come to him and had ran away from the master. And of course, again, we're talking a completely different style of slavery, but it was slavery nonetheless. And he comes to him and he tells him, go back to your slave, or go back to your master. Then Paul writes this letter, and in the letter he goes on to talk about any debts that he's accrued, you pay him to me. But then there's the one verse where he says, you treat him and you accept him like a brother. Now, what that did is that, it's kind of like what we call jailhouse religion. Because from that point on, slaves were going, wait a minute, if I come back as a Christian, they'll accept me in as a brother? Well, that's what Paul said to do. And so therefore, it undermined the very institution of slavery within the Roman world, because a lot of slave owners had become Christian. They had converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
And so when Paul writes this letter, they were going, well, I can't kill him. I can't imprison him. They've converted to my faith. So because of, and again, that was a problem that Bonhoeffer dealt with. One of the reasons why he didn't want to go to war was because he knew that he would be killing fellow Christians of other nations. That has a huge bearing on somebody's thoughts.
The idea that we're getting ready to celebrate 4th of July, and I have a few family members who would look at that and be very cynical and very downright just sad about it. America's done some terrible things, and it's like, you know what? Go create your own country,
Right.
and you tell me how perfect it goes
Right.
for the last near 250 years. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like, good Lord, you go to any country, okay? And here's the thing: a lot of people would say, "Are you roping us in with China?" No, but go to China, go to North Korea, go to South Korea, go to Brazil, go to, how's the Ottoman Empire doing? All these things that were a thing. And I mentioned Ottoman Empire because it's not the Ottoman Empire anymore. Countries go through changes. Countries fall. Countries do all these things. And honestly, I don't think countries. I think nowadays, and somebody can clip this and take this and run with it if they want to, if it ever happens. But I don't think countries fall like they used to. I think they just rebrand, if you will. Look at Japan. It didn't really fall because it's still around. They just changed that flag to a dot. So
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing. Of course, I mean, a lot of that, too, has to do with the fact that over the last century, we've not had wars where one nation has went to war to try to completely wipe out another nation or culture. It's pretty much been a war more, about up until Vietnam. Really, it was go in and take over a certain amount of real estate and hold it, and try to defeat as many enemy targets as possible. But talking about America doing some atrocious things, another conversation I got into was, everybody, and listen, I don't care what skin color you paint your Jesus, okay? But everybody got all upset because the question was asked, or the statement was made that Moses was a black guy. And I said, well, he was Hebrew. And they said, well, yeah, but he was from Egypt. I said, but he wasn't born in Egypt. And I went through the story there about when Joseph went to Egypt, he didn't go serve the Egyptians as we come to know them. That was the lower Egyptians, and at that time they were not in control of all of Egypt. It was the Hyksos kings, and they called their kings, the Hyksos called their kings Pharaoh as well. That's the reason why the scripture says that there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, because the Hyksos, they were related, they were Semites, and they were related to the Hebrews, ancient relation to the Hebrews. And so when the Egyptians, the lower Egyptians, started to conquer territories, they would go in and they would completely cancel out all of that culture's history and their heroes. Same thing our cancel culture is doing. And so if you look at ancient Egypt, a lot of people are like, well, there's no record of Joseph in ancient Egypt. No, there's not, because you have to look at the Hyksos timeline. When you look at that, there he is. He'll show up, because the Egyptians from lower Egypt, they didn't know what Joseph had done. They didn't know that Joseph had saved Egypt from starvation.
Right.
Had they have known what he did, they would have probably been less apt to let the Hebrews carry his bones out of Egypt. But let's look at what the Bible says. It says that there was a point where the Egyptians said, hey, the Jews, the Hebrews, they're outgrowing us. So their attempt to correct that was that all the male children had to be killed. So how did they know? Because, birth certificates weren't chiseled out in stone back then. Well, I mean, let's just get down to the issue of it. Skin color. And the lower Egyptians was a darker skin. And you mentioned the Turks. One of the reasons why that the Greeks to this day are a darker skin color is because the Turks had forced intermarriage.
Yeah.
Because the Greeks prior to that were lighter skinned people.
Yeah.
So it's not about evil white men. It's about evilness in the heart of men.
Yeah. Period.
And that is what causes one race to look and say, we must annihilate these other races.
Yeah, and here's the thing. We're getting to the birthday of the United States, and that's what I think that's what our topic is today. And it's less about what's happening around the country right now, because you can just look out your window and ask somebody, and they'll tell you.
Yeah.
We want to talk about what it means for 4th of July. It doesn't matter your skin tone.
Right.
What was the movie? Not Platoon. Oh, Full Metal Jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Great line. Okay, it doesn't matter what you are. You're all green. In that movie, they said it best. All of us Americans, we're all together in this.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned cancel culture trying to wipe out certain things. And surprise, surprise, United States history is the Civil War. So by all means, statue of Robert E. Lee, I don't want it torn down and destroyed. I want it torn down and put into a museum so I can point to it and say, that guy right there fought very hard for what he believed in, but we deem it wrong. We deem it totally disgusting, and we don't want that to happen again. And we shouldn't be destroying our history, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, because you go and try to do that, it's going to confuse a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Something as simple as, this is going to sound really weird, but for people who are my age and my age group, and you probably remember this part about video games, one of my younger brothers, he's like 8 or 9 on my wife's side. I call him my brother. But I said, "Oh, did you put in a cheat code for your video game?" And he looked at me and he goes, "What's a cheat code?" And I was like, "Well, every video game has like cheat codes you can put in." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know what those are." And what I'm saying is that not many people are talking about cheat codes anymore, and they go by the wayside. That's going to happen for big things like American history. And you think those small things where kids don't know about it today, when somebody mentions a cassette tape, I know what a cassette tape is because my parents talked about a cassette tape. And my kids will probably know what cassette tapes are because we'll sit and watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'll say, "Hey, look, he's got a cassette tape." And my kids are like, "What's that?" And then I teach them. And, you continuously teach them these small things, but that's what we got to be doing about these big things. You mentioned that schools today, and I can attest to it, don't teach certain things. We should be teaching the things that were omitted from the Declaration of Independence. We should be teaching that Jefferson, there was a quote-unquote evil white guy who said, "Hey, slavery, not a good thing. We should probably learn ways to get rid of it."
Well, and you mentioned Lee. Lee was actually anti-slavery. And another one that the left just loves to hate on is Nathan Bedford Forrest. He started the KKK. That's not true. He took his oath to join the KKK at, I believe that is Maxwell House Coffee Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the coffee company that we all know, and they did that there. Now, what they don't teach about Nathan Bedford Forrest is that what made him leave the KKK, and that was that when he joined it. And we're here talking about not the birth of a nation, because if you try to go look that up, then you're going to get this you're going to get propaganda about the KKK. So that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about the Independence Day and the birth of America, and what made him join it was, and really the KKK to initially come together was the carpetbaggers and the scallywags. And they were coming down south, and Lincoln had made a deal that every Confederate officer would be able to keep his horse, his weapon, and basically to get them on to the next stage of life after the war, because many of the people in the federal government wanted to arrest and execute them. And Lincoln said, "No, we're not going to do that because that won't bring healing to the nation."
Yeah, got to learn how to forgive.
Well, then Lincoln's assassinated. So then you've got the carpetbaggers, you got the scallywags. They're coming down, and the other agreement was those that could pay for their plantation would be able to keep that plantation. Now, it wasn't going to be a working plantation, but it would be a working farm. And so the scallywags were coming in and saying, "We are going to go to the bank and we're going to buy that up." That's the reason why that if you go along some of these country roads down south, you'll see a lot of these just like where there's two stacks sticking up and it's a foundation, because what they did, instead of letting the government take it over, they burnt those houses down. Because what the scallywags were saying they were going to do was come in and they were going to buy it and then move the former slaves into them. And that wasn't so much the problem as much as it was going to give the government more control of land and property. So it didn't take long for many people in the government to start to seize and figure out how to get more power. So they would burn these houses down. Well, as time went on, many of those that was within the Klan began to try to scare the former slaves, saying that they were ghosts or spirits of the Confederate dead. This is where Forrest breaks rank with them, and he writes a letter to then President Ulysses S. Grant, and this is where we get the Anti-Terrorist Act. Because he tells them, you need to make a law, and he said, if you'll do this, I will give you the names of the coven leaders and the addresses of where they live.
Right.
And so this law states, this is why. Now, Halloween's a little bit different story, but this is why Antifa, this is why you know that the left does not care, because this law states that 4 adults cannot be in town wearing a mask. Why? Because that's what the Klan did. And so Forrest is really the reason. This isn't to uplift him. I'm just pointing out stuff that people don't teach because it doesn't fit their narrative. Forrest is the one who brought the first version of the Klan down. He's the one who did it. And in his last speech, you can still Google it. It's still there. The very last speech that he gave in public was to a group which is very much like the NAACP. Sorry. And in that, he says that the black culture needed to run for public office, and they needed to start businesses. And he said that if they were, and vote, those 3 things. And he said if they were impeded at any point, that he could raise a military, because his cavalry stayed loyal to him. He said he could raise an army of 14,000 men. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that the Confederates were made up of good guys. I'm saying we have to study our own history, because if not, it is being twisted and misconfigured and misconstrued in order, I'm just going to say it, to brainwash, as they have done successfully, brainwash people.
Yeah, and here's another part of history that doesn't get talked about. But in Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a prominent black community that rose up, and they were doing great. And I only learned about it when I got to college, which is strange, because you would think this is something that we need to talk about when you omit certain things from the history books.
Yeah.
And listen, this isn't a political thing. This is just, there are people in power, not right now, just throughout time, who started to take things out that just didn't fit the overarching narrative of, well, complete control by the government.
Yeah.
That's the thing. The thing is, I'm not anti human rights.
Right.
You know,
right.
I'm not anti-civil rights. I'm not anti-white. I'm not anti-black. I'm anti-government. I'm anti-huge government.
Sure.
My government should do this. It should put up a, figuratively, wall and tell outsiders and say, hey, listen, you want to come in, you got to go through this. You want to attack us, you're going to have to deal with this. That's all they should do. Other than that, hey, we got roads that we need to take care of. Let the states take care of that. That's my thing. We could talk about that another day. But when they take things out, like the people on the Confederacy who had certain letters like that, because that's amazing. That's something that should be talked about. Did they make a bad decision? Sure, they made the wrong choice. They're on the losing team. That's too bad. It could be forgiven if you look at it and say, hey, listen, we need to take care of these people now. And even though I made the wrong decision, that doesn't mean my opinion doesn't matter. And that's the glory of this nation.
Yeah.
Because when you take things out like the Tulsa massacre, because that was a massacre.
It was.
There were hundreds of black families that were doing amazing. They had their own businesses. They were running the schools. They ran for office. They were doing awesome. And the National Guard came in and burned them to the ground.
Yep.
Burned them to the ground because at the time, because we can agree, racism is real.
Yeah.
The racists at the time who were in power in federal government were writing things like, listen, we can't have these black people doing better than white folk. And that's all it came down to is they saw it.
Well, it was actually, you mentioned that I didn't hear about it until like 11 or 12 years ago, and I'm 43 years old, and that was the first time I ever heard of what they called Black Wall Street.
Yep.
and it was actually poised to do better than Wall Street.
Yep. See, the thing is that there is a way to uplift certain cultures in this country, and it has always been, and this is going to sound crass, but it's always been flipping the bird to big government.
Mm-hmm.
It always has been. And I know people are going to say, "Oh, I don't like that type of phrasing." Okay, fine. We're going to dump any type of tea the government wants to protect into the harbor, whatever, you name it. We did every single time. Black America does it best when they say, "No, I don't care about the government." White America does it best when they say, "No, I don't care about the government." Hispanic, America does it best when we look at the government and we say, "I don't care, government. I'm going to do it this way." There's a young man that goes to our church, and he didn't like the idea of working a 9-to-5 job at a fast food restaurant, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to start a power washing company." I said, "You can do that."
Yeah.
And he knows he can do that. And guess what? He's Hispanic, fresh off the boat, coming over here from Puerto Rico, so he's not an immigrant, but like not attuned to the culture as much as other people would be. And here's the thing, that's always what it's been. I don't care what regulations you have. This nation has always been stubborn against the government. We shouldn't be stubborn towards each other. I should be able to have somebody sit across this table, both of us would, and have them tell us why they think we should have certain policies that, I don't know, you name it, take care of puppies who are in inner cities. I don't know, And I should be able to sit there and go, "Okay, tell me about it." I'm going to think you're crazy right off the bat, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to sit here and listen. And that's the thing. When you tear down monuments, when you firebomb neighborhoods, when you're wearing masks and you're calling yourself anti-fascists, you are an oxymoron. And so what you do is you say, "Okay, this system is bad. How do we talk this through?" Because you're right. And I will agree with any leftist or Democrat or socialist or whatever. When you say this government, this sucks, the conservatives and the liberals are not getting it done in government, you're right. How do we, the people, figure it out? This isn't a pro workers' rights or unionize and do all this stuff. This is, how do we, the people, we as in together but individually, come as one? And it sounds strange, but it's possible, because the thing is, you get a perfect rendition of what it means to be together but also individual in the Trinity.
Right.
Am I right? I mean, you have this moment where God says, "Let's make them in our image." But then you have him also stating in John, talking about he was the Word and the Word was with God, and all these things where he's separate but he's all together. And that's what we need to think of, is how can we be together but individual?
Well, you actually hit the nail on the head, and that's a complete discourse. I mean, that's something that we don't have time to go into that fully. But one of the things that the United States did on our founding is the left hates this, but it's true, and just because they hate it and they lie about it doesn't make it any less true. America was founded to be a Christian constitutional republic. Now, I don't say Christian nation because of the fact that we do have the First Amendment and we don't have a state-ran church. We are a nation that we give each religion equal footing, as long as it's a reputable religion and it's not something completely off the wall. But people can even practice certain things that are off the wall as long as it's not endangering other people. Anyway, one of the things that God did with the Old Testament, and you mentioned the Trinity, and I by no means say what I'm getting ready to say to belittle or to demean the Trinity, because I wouldn't do that. But when you look at with Israel, you had the civil, you had the religious, and then you had the social aspect. And America, we have the executive, we have the judicial, and we have the executive. Well, I've already mentioned executive, but the congressional. No, that's okay. And each one of those represent. I mean, if you look at God is he's 100%. It's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, and Christ represents us on our behalf, because we can't do that ourselves. So then you've got the executive, which is that would be, in the Old Testament, that was representative of the Holy Spirit, because it was what was moving throughout the earth, which is what the job of the Holy Spirit does. And then you have the judicial, which God is the judge of all the earth. Abraham says, "Shall not the judge of all the earth do that which is right?" And again, I don't have time to go into that complete discourse, but America set our government up very much like that of the Jews. And we have three branches of government. Why? Because there is a Trinity, and each person of the Trinity is distinct but unified. And that is what our government, the reason why our government is set up like that is because we are a nation that's supposed to be a nation of laws, but we're a nation of laws because we're a nation of morality and faith. And because of that, if we get our act together morally and through faith, we can act unified.
It was legislative, by the way.
Legislative, yeah. That was the one
I looked it up. I was like, man, how are we going to talk about the government? I can't even remember that one branch. I'm a fool. I'm a fraud.
My excuse is I lost a lot of blood.
No, you see, that's my thing, is that there are ways these things work, and I'm gonna backpedal back to the microwave comment I made. That microwave comment is about people getting upset with the courts, or with the Supreme Court, I should say. Listen, if you have an idea, take it through the necessary channels. We have been lied to by a spirit of get what you need on demand right away. Like there's an evil spirit out there like that. I call it the enemy. You may call it bad juju. You may call it bad voodoo, whatever. I'm going to call it the enemy. And what that enemy wants for all humans is to get into a rhythm of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And that is wanting something super quick. Because, look, it is not a human right for an abortion, but if you want it to be a human right, not a human right, a right in the Constitution, then, okay, go through the necessary channels.
That's what I was going to say. We have an amendment process.
We have an amendment process. And that's the thing is a lot of people are going to say, no, the courts should just do this and not overturn Roe v. Wade. Guys, I hate to tell you, but one of the champions of Roe v. Wade, she said it herself. This is faulty. It doesn't have the best. Yeah. And R.I.P. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But she said it best herself. She said that this is faulty. This isn't going to hold up that long, and it didn't.
It didn't.
And here's the thing: I'm not celebrating like, oh yay, we're not killing babies anymore, because that is a good thing.
Right.
I don't think people should be. What I'm celebrating is that, guys, this is the most anti-establishment, anti-government thing our court's done in a long time. Now they just need to get up there and say any type of gun law is against your constitutional right to carry in every state. But hey, we're baby steps. The thing is that this is where we come together and we say, hey, listen, those of you in California who want abortion to be legal, I got some good news for you. It's legal in your state.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, I'm never moving to Arkansas. Okay. And I think that is the weirdest thing. I've spoken to siblings, I've spoken to family members like cousins.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll hear things like, JaVaughn, I can't go into this city without people harassing me. Why do you want to go?
Well, and why are they harassing you? Because that's my issue right there, and that's what I'm talking about with many on the left. Is it's not enough that they have the right to have an abortion in the state they live in, and they want to force that on the states like Arkansas, like Tennessee, like Missouri, and look, let's point to Louisiana, a Democrat governor who he signed a very strict abortion law, like probably a month before Roe v. Wade was overturned. Now, he lives in a predominantly heavy Catholic area, this isn't a one-sided issue. This was a Democrat governor who did this.
It's just wild.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at that and you go, I disagree with abortion. I don't want my money going to one, so you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to move to New York. I'm not going to move to California. I'm not going to move to New Mexico and some of these states like that. That's going to spend my money going towards that.
Yeah, it's again, like, I'll ask you. Do you go places? Do you move to areas that you and I believe that God calls us to certain areas, but is Portland, Oregon on your top list of places to live? I mean,
no, I've never thought
honest,
about the place.
Like, that place is not where I want to live. I don't want to live in, Washington. I don't want to live in California anymore. The thing is, it's like, that's what I can't wrap my head around. Everybody wants it all to be the same everywhere, and that's the beauty of the United States.
Yeah.
It's not.
Right.
It's not. This country is so awesome that you can have your utopia anywhere.
Right.
And as soon as we make the government small enough to where we can literally have our utopia anywhere, I'm talking about I'm just going to go build a log cabin somewhere and chill out. That's when
anarchy.
It becomes true. Well, okay, anarchy is not always a bad thing. We'll talk about that another day. But when you subtract all of that, that's how it's always been. A lot of people are going to say, "Oh, well, you're just a conservative and you don't care for the land." You know what, dog? God says that I need to tend to this land and take care of it. So yeah, I do care about this land.
Yeah.
Oh, you're conservative, so you don't care for women's rights. I care about women's rights so much that I want them to use that right to vote in their state to overturn whatever law they want.
Well, somebody said, well, they're going to force everyone to be Christians, and it was on, I don't remember but my dad responded. He said, well, you can't force someone to be a Christian. And so there's that argument. Well, they're going to force everybody to be Christian. I think it was Joy Behar on The View, or Whoopi Goldberg. No, it was Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, Whoopi.
She said, I hope that Justice Thomas understands this with him and his white wife. They're going to come and split them up. Okay. They hate that guy. They hate that guy.
You know how many hard R N words were used as soon as it was dropped on that man? I have not once, I kid you not, Thomas, I have not once seen a conservative look at Obama and all over Twitter or Instagram or whatever and just be like, this N word. I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah.
But listen, Clarence Thomas got called every racial slur under the sun, and I thought to myself, who is this coming from?
Well, let's go back to when he was I don't know. I guess you would. When were you born, in the 80s?
Me?
Yeah.
No, 94.
Oh, so you weren't even alive when he was confirmed at the court.
I've seen the clips.
I remember it on the radio. I mean, here, they bring up Anita Hill and they make up all these stories. I mean, it was just like it was with Kavanaugh.
Is this the one where Biden was off on him?
Yeah. Biden was on that committee listening, or he was on that committee that was trying to he was trying to get him not confirmed. And I mean, even back then, I mean, they hated the guy. And the reason I was actually listening to something on NPR today, which I rarely ever listen to the NPR, but it was on there and they were talking about Clarence Thomas, so it got my attention a little bit. I believe it was on NPR, but anyway, they were talking about going all the way back about, he was against affirmative action. I was like, yeah, okay, he needed to be, because affirmative action is not a good thing. Because one of the things that he points out is that affirmative action actually kept the elites, that many of whom were white when all that was going on, kept them in power because they had more control as to what minorities were appointed to what jobs.
Yep.
So, I'm going, again, there's Clarence Thomas in his genius. That's why he was nominated, and thank God that's why he's still on the Supreme Court and was able to vote Roe v. Wade out.
It just blows my mind. I mean, first of all of the funny memes about there's this song called that has a chorus in it where it goes HOES mad, and it just that repeats over and over because modern music is profound today, but it just repeats that over and over. And it was literally Clarence Thomas with sunglasses on, smiling with his arms crossed, and it was one of those funny memes that's always gets me laughing because it's that's just our culture. Memes are the hieroglyphs of our day. And I sit there and I think, Yeah, when people talk about these things like, oh, now that it's totally gone, they're going to come after interracial marriage, or oh, they're going to make everybody Christian. Your dad was right. You can't make anybody a Christian, guys. That's a choice. That is a choice up to you. You can choose to be Christian or not. And those of us who are Christian, one of my cousins said this to me, and it was like he was calling me out. And he said, "You just want me to be Christian. I know you do." And it's like, yeah, okay. What's wrong with that? I don't want you to. I want, from what I believe, I want you to have eternal, everlasting life, and love and joy that is just, you can't even explain it. That's a bad thing. I don't want, I think a lot of people hear, oh, they're going to make people Christian. And it's like, you think Christianity is the same as it was 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's not. I say 10 years ago is because Christianity is very good at evolving into what God truly wants it to be over time. And I would venture to say that every 10 years there's something new that comes out. No. There are things that we have hard lines that we do not cross.
Yeah.
We have a lot of those, and we've talked about them on the show before. But something that hasn't changed from the base level is Christ died for your sins and he loves you. That's it. And that liberty that we get, that we talk about in the Declaration of Independence, and I've heard a lot of people say, well, not everybody, founding father was a Christian. You're probably right. That's okay. But you want to know where they found most of their morals?
Was from the Bible.
Was from the Bible. Okay? It wasn't from the Book of Mormon. It wasn't from the Quran. It wasn't from the Torah, which, of course, is part of the Bible. So I guess, yes, you could say that. But still, it was from the Bible. And something, you could deny it all you want, but that's how they took care of things, and that's how a lot of people are alive and free and living well. And a lot of people will say, well, you don't care about poverty. I do. It's the church's job to take care of those who are poor. Yeah. And something, there are a lot of churches that I would call out and say, you guys aren't doing your job. But you want to know something? There are a lot of churches that aren't going to be talked about because we don't want the spotlight. We don't care. Right. This isn't me patting this church on the back. But you know what? I want to give a shout out to Living Water Church Conway. We have an event going on tomorrow. And we will be having, and if you live in the area and you're listening to this, we will be having food. We will be celebrating the 4th of July. Yes, on July 3rd. But still, we will be celebrating our Independence Day, because that's what's important for this church to be doing, for all churches to be doing, is to be taking care of those who don't have the means to take care of themselves, for those who are down and who are downtrodden, who are out, because that's what America is all about. Yeah. America is putting some burgers and brats on the barbecue and opening up a nice cold Dr. Pepper and sitting down and looking across the street and saying, hey, neighbor, do you want a burger?
Yeah.
That's what
hospitality.
That's what this country is all about. That's what it's always going to be about. And something? I would venture to say that everybody in our congregation, if you just got home and you just got an abortion, I venture to say that everybody in our congregation would look at you the same and say the same thing and say, do you want a burger? Because we don't care what you've done. It's not about perfection like my mom always says. It's about the progress that Christ wants us to have.
I'll wrap up my side of the exchange with saying this. I go back to when George W. Bush, and I'm not always the biggest fan. He was a little bit more of a globalist than I like. But I do thank God he was in office when 9/11 happened, and it wasn't Al Gore, for a lot of reasons. But when he was running against Al Gore in that election, in the election process, and they asked him if was he going to seek to outlaw abortion. He said, I can't outlaw what's in the hearts of people. He said, you have to pray that there's a heart change. And then he went on to talk about that he had accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior. And one of the reasons why, and we mentioned about many on the left, they don't want to go through the amendment process, is because deep down they know that most of the stuff they want, they would never get through
Yeah.
in a constitutional convention. They just wouldn't. So what they do is they want to run it through the courts. Now, how did that work out for you? 50 years of Roe v. Wade gone, and it's actually more proof that it's unconstitutional than it is. The reason is because you may not like the process, but the process is there for a reason. You may not like the rules, but the rules are there for a reason. And we abide by those rules, because when we don't abide by those rules, then much of the chaos that we see right now when we turn on the TV with certain people like Jane's Revenge, that's coming from what George W. Bush would be talking about. You need to change the hearts of people. Evil is not willing to change the hearts of people. Evil wants to enslave. Evil wants to take your liberty away. That's what the devil, I'll call it who it is. That's what he wants to do. He wants to enslave you. He wants to take your liberty away. He's not concerned about changing your heart. He's concerned about controlling you.
Yeah.
Christ is the one who changes your heart. Christ is the one who, Galatians says, it is for freedom that he set us free. We have been given liberty because he did. And we're celebrating this weekend. Monday, we will celebrate the birth of the United States, July 4th, 1776, because some forefathers who simply believed in God and was willing to stand on the principles of his word. Some of them may not have been believers, but they certainly acknowledged that there was a God who did insert himself in the affairs of men. We are able to celebrate that freedom and that liberty today because of that. And it is up to us as Americans today, and most importantly as Christians, to uphold and carry on those ideas and those beliefs of freedom and liberty.
Declaration of Independence, like you said, July 4th on 1776. The second section, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Happy 4th of July, everybody. This has been a great exchange. We love you. Be safe.